I gave my son and his wife a mortgage-free home, and they repaid me by trying to steal my life. It started with the sound of a text message. I was standing at the kitchen sink in my modest little home, the scent of brewing coffee curling softly in the morning air, when my phone buzzed on the counter. Just one buzz. Just one message. And yet, it shattered something inside me more than any storm ever could. You won't be joining us on the family cruise. Melanie prefers to keep it just family. Just family. 2 words. A decision, a dismissal. And somehow, I wasn't part of that anymore. My name is Carolyn Walker. I'm 62 years old, a retired schoolteacher, a widow for 7 long, quiet years, and a mother to 1 son, David. I raised him with everything I had, and then some. My fingers hovered above the screen. They felt stiff, cold. I don't know how long I stood there before I typed the only thing I could manage. Okay, that word carried more than it looked like. Behind those 4 letters were layers of grief, disbelief, a gut punch that landed deeper than anything physical ever could. I hit send, and I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, the kitchen fading around me like background noise. The coffee sat untouched. So did the day. A few months ago, I gave David and his wife Melanie a house. Not a loan, not a down payment. A house, fully paid. No mortgage. No debt. I emptied my life savings, the sum of a teacher's frugal years, my husband's pension, and a lifetime of penny pinch. I told myself it was a gift of love, a foundation for their growing family. I told myself that's what good mothers do. I picked the paint colors myself. I assembled furniture in my garage with hands that once grated papers late into the night. I even sewed the curtains by hand. Soft lavender for the bedroom. Warm oatmeal tones for the nursery. They said they'd need someday. But I didn't just build a house, I gave them a piece of me, and they left me behind. That morning, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by years of effort, chairs I refinished, walls I painted, family photos I had paid to frame. My eyes wandered to a picture of David, age 7, smiling with chocolate ice cream smeared across his nose at Disneyland. I remembered that trip. I paid for every hotel, every meal. I had to use part of my summer savings. But I wanted him to have the memory. I needed him to have it. I gave without keeping score. But now, all I could see were receipts dressed as memories. They don't visit much anymore. They don't call, either. I told myself it was normal. Young couples get busy. Work, stress, kids to be. Life moves fast, but the truth moved more slowly. It crept in through the silence, wrapped itself around my shoulders like a cold shawl. I began to realize I hadn't been visited, I had been used. I was useful when something needed to be paid for. I was helpful when something needed to be fixed. But once the moving boxes were unpacked, and the rooms filled with furniture with my fingerprints on them, I disappeared from view, and now, I wasn't even welcome on a cruise I had indirectly made possible. The one I had heard about only in passing, unexcited slip from Melanie during a rushed phone call. And yet, I had still packed a small toiletry kit, just in case they invited me. I called Nancy the next morning. My best friend since the 4th grade, fellow retiree, and the one person who could read me with a glance. She arrived within the hour. No questions, just a concern. She stepped into my kitchen and looked at me. I slid the phone across the table without a word. Nancy read the message slowly. Her jaw tightened. "They've been planning this," she said, not blinking. I shook my head. I thought, maybe it was just Melanie. She's always been strong. "But David, you raised a good boy," Nancy said gently. "But you also raised a boy who never had to struggle, who always had you fixing things." And Melanie, she saw that. She saw what she could shape him into. The words stung, because they were true. I looked down. "I stayed useful too long. You made yourself small, Carolyn," she said. "And now they're treating you like you belong there." That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, the ceiling above me blank, like a question waiting to be answered. Nancy's words circled like storm clouds. "They've been planning this," at 2:17 a.m. I got up. I walked to the kitchen, powered on my laptop, and stared at the screen. For years, Melanie had helped manage my online accounts. She told me it was easier that way. "You shouldn't worry about these things in retirement," she'd say. But that night, I logged in with new eyes, and what I saw made my heart turn cold. At first glance, everything looked normal. My checking account, my modest retirement fund, nothing large has gone. But then I clicked deeper. Small withdrawals, steady ones, labeled property maintenance, emergency repair, supplemental utilities, all supposedly for my benefit. Only I hadn't authorized any of them. And worse, Melanie had listed herself as a secondary account holder. She had been slowly siphoning money, quietly, over time, with soft smiles and reassurances, and David, blind, or willfully ignorant. I sat back in the kitchen chair, my palms icy against the ceramic mug I still hadn't sipped from. But I wasn't afraid. I wasn't heartbroken. I was awake, and something new settled inside me, something sharper than grief. Resolve. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was betrayal, and I had spent too many years making excuses for it. By morning, I had already made up my mind. I picked up the phone and dialed Mr. Harris, my longtime attorney. Mrs. Walker, he answered warmly. Everything all right? No, I said, and that's why I need to see you today. The waiting room in Mr. Harris's office was quiet and sunlit, the kind of quiet that usually calms people. But not me, not that morning. I wasn't here to be calmed. I was here to take back what was mine. Mr. Harris greeted me with a gentle smile, but when he saw my face, the smile faded into something more serious. He didn't offer coffee or chit-chat like he usually did. He just led me into his office and closed the door behind us. What's going on, Caroline? He asked, his tone measured. I reached into my bag and pulled out a printed spreadsheet, the same one I had compiled at 2 a.m. while the rest of the world slept. I need to reverse the house transfer, I said calmly. I need every account locked. Every power of attorney was revoked. I need to make sure no one touches a penny or makes a decision on my behalf ever again. He leaned forward, reading through the documents. These are multiple transfers, he muttered, flipping pages, all in small amounts, disguised as routine expenses. He looked up. You didn't authorize these. Not a single one. And Melanie. She has account access. She added herself as a secondary user years ago. Said it was just, in case I ever needed help. I was stupid. No, he said. You were trusting. That's not the same thing. But it felt the same, the kind of hurt that wraps itself around your bones. I want to press charges if it comes to that, I said firmly. He paused, then nodded. You may be facing a legal storm, Caroline, are you prepared for that? I looked him straight in the eye. I've weathered worse. The next step was painful, but necessary. Mr. Harris called in a financial investigator, an old colleague, who specialized in elder financial abuse cases. His name was Greg Avery, a quiet, sharp-eyed man who didn't say much during our first meeting, but when he saw the spreadsheet, his demeanor changed. I've seen this pattern before, he said, tapping on the printed data. They siphon small amounts to avoid detection, build false narratives we're just helping, and slowly tighten control. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. How long will it take? We work fast. I'll need access to all your statements for the last 5 years. We'll build a full timeline, dates, amounts, attached names, inconsistencies. And once you have that, if there's enough, we'll file an official complaint. Civil and criminal. You'll have a case. I nodded. And just like that, the plan was set in motion. I was no longer the woman waiting to be remembered. I was the woman they've forgotten till now. 2 days later, I woke up to find a white envelope slipped under my front door. Plain, familiar. Melanie always used these when she organized paperwork for me. I didn't hear the door open, which meant she, or more likely, someone she sent, had dropped it off early, while I was still asleep, probably before boarding their cruise. There was a sticky note attached. Her signature, looping handwriting just as sweetly deceptive as her voice. Just sign whenever you're ready. Mom, it'll make everything easier while we're away. I peeled it off and opened the envelope. Inside, neatly stacked legal documents. Well formatted, efficient, and cold. At first glance, it looked routine, simple updates. Estate documents, housekeeping, authorizations. But I've learned that the devil doesn't scream anymore. He wears a suit and hides in the fine print. And there it was. Buried 3 pages deep, irrevocable. Power of attorney. Permanent, binding, unquestionable. Control over all financial accounts. Control over property. Control over medical decisions. Control to admit me to a care facility. Without my consent, the paper didn't shake in my hand. I did, not out of fear. Not anymore. Out of the clarity that they hadn't been waiting to hurt me someday. They were already halfway there. They were preparing to take everything while I was still alive. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't call Nancy. I just stood there in the kitchen, one hand on the counter, the other holding the envelope like a piece of my soul had snapped into focus. Then I whispered to no one. Perhaps to the woman I used to be. You almost signed this. Almost, but not today. Today I saw the trap for what it was, and I was going to use this not to surrender. But as evidence, they thought they were 2 steps ahead. They had no idea I had just caught up. By noon, I was back in Mr. Harris's office. This time, I didn't wait in the lobby. The secretary saw my face and waved me right in. I placed the envelope on his desk. Carefully, like a loaded weapon. He read through the documents slowly. His jaw tightened by the second. This isn't just manipulative, he said. It's predatory. If I had signed it, I said, they could have put me in a care home while they sold everything I own and drained every account. He nodded grimly. We'll move faster. We already filed the house reversal. Yes, it's in process. The property will be frozen by week's end. I've contacted the bank to revoke all external access. But now, he tapped the envelope. We add legal protection. If they attempt coercion again, we take it to court with a full timeline of events, forged access, and financial abuse. What happens to the house? We'll sell it. Legally, they won't be able to block it. And I suggest you relocate. If we play this correctly, they'll be served the truth, not in words, but in paperwork. Back home, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like the scene of a robbery. Only no windows were broken, and the intruders had keys, smiles, and thank yous. But it was still theft, so I packed slowly. Methodically, I picked a small apartment in the next town over. Modest, affordable, quiet, paid in full. In my name alone. I left behind no forwarding address, and I waited for their cruise to end. Waited for them to come home. Waited for them to realize the house they thought was theirs no longer was. The night before they returned from their cruise, I stood alone in my new apartment. It was small, quiet, no custom paint colors, no curated furniture. Just 4 walls, a working heater, and something I hadn't felt in a very long time: control. There were no echoing memories of dinners I wasn't invited to. No framed smiles that came at the cost of my savings. Just a blank slate and my reflection in the mirror. I was no longer decorating for others. No longer buying love in the language of furniture and mortgages. I was done being useful. I was ready to be visible. And the moment was coming. Their ship docked at 9:45 a.m. by 10:20. David and Melanie pulled up to the house, my housestand, and smiling. Luggage tumbling out of the trunk like they hadn't a care in the world. I watched from across the street, parked discreetly. I didn't want to ambush, I wanted clarity. For them. For me. Melanie stepped out first, barking into her phone. Tell the mortgage officer we'll have everything signed this week. Mom said she's fine with all of it. David trailed behind, still scrolling on his phone, detached, passive. But then they stopped. 2 unfamiliar cars were parked in the driveway. A moving van was idling beside them. A young couple stood near the front porch, laughing with a realtor. Boxers were stacked neatly at their feet. A welcome mat rolled up and ready. David froze. Mom, Melanie's head whipped around. What the hell is going on? They walked toward the house, Melanie's voice already rising. Who are these people? That was my cue. I stepped out from across the street and approached. David's eyes lit up with relief until he saw my expression. You won't have to manage anything for me anymore, I said calmly. Melanie narrowed her eyes. What does that mean? David looked panicked. Why are there strangers in our house? It's not your house, I said evenly. Not anymore. Melanie's mouth opened to argue. But I reached into my bag and handed David a folder neatly labeled. Here are the only contracts that matter, I said. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside were the house reversal documents, proof of property transfer to my name, a copy of the asset freeze order, detailed list of unauthorized transactions traced to Melanie's linked access. Maloney snatched it from his hands and scanned the pages rapidly, her face falling with each line. This is illegal, she hissed. None of this will hold up. We're helping you. No, I replied. You were helping yourselves. Draining my accounts behind my back, filing for control over my medical care. Trying to assume authority over my life while smiling on my face. David stepped toward me, voice trembling. We didn't mean, I held up a hand. No, you didn't mean to get caught. Melanie's anger flared. You're making a mistake. We can explain. I reached into my bag again. A second folder. This, I said, handing it to her, is every piece of evidence I've compiled, every forged transaction, every login you made on my behalf, every single paper trail that says, you took advantage of me. She opened it, and for the first time since I'd known her, Melanie Caldwell was speechless. If you take me to court, I said, voice calm and even, this becomes public record. David's face had gone pale. He looked like a man suddenly realizing the weight of the shipwreck around him wasn't water, it was Melanie. I was your mother, I said, looking him in the eye. You made me your target. I didn't wait for a response. I turned, and I walked away. The drive to my new apartment was silent. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. But I did breathe a full breath, deep and clean. For years, I had confused silence with peace. Now, I knew better. Peace doesn't come from being tolerated. It comes from choosing yourself. I unlocked the door and stepped into my quiet little space. No family portraits, no lavender curtains, just one small plant on the windowsill and a table waiting for tea. My phone buzzed, a message from David. Mom, please call me. We didn't mean to hurt you. I stared at it for a long while. Then I turned the phone face down and walked to the kitchen. I had nothing left to give. And in that emptiness, I found freedom. For days after I handed them the folders, the legal one and the truth-telling one, I received another message. This time, it wasn't from David, it was from Melanie. We're willing to discuss options. We never meant for things to go this far. Let's talk like a family. No greeting, no apology, no acknowledgement, just strategy. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to discuss with people who had made a business plan out of love and betrayal. They had underestimated me. They had seen the quiet, widowed schoolteacher and assumed I wouldn't fight back. They thought I would fold under pressure. But I had spent a lifetime teaching children how to read between the lines. Now, I had learned to read people, too, and I saw them. A week later, Melanie showed up at my new apartment building. I saw her through the peepholepolish.com, even slightly rehearsed. I didn't open the door. She knocked again, firmer. Caroline, please, can we just talk? Her voice wasn't angry this time. It was pleading, sugary sweet, the same tone she used when she needed something. I waited. She eventually slid an envelope under the door. I didn't touch it until she left. Inside was a handwritten note. You're hurting David. He's lost without you. Don't let money come between your family. We still love you. No mention of what they did. No admission. No remorse, just manipulation in cursive. I placed the note in a folder marked Retain for Evidence, because now I have documented everything. It was David's turn the following week. He came alone. I was on the balcony watering my plant when I saw him walking up the stairs. Shoulders hunched, carrying a paper bag. Inside, my favorite banana bread, from the bakery on Sycamore Street, the one we used to go to when he was small. For a moment, I almost softened, but then I remembered. This same son stood silent while his wife drained my accounts, smiled while she filed legal documents for permanent power over my body. My life, my choices. He had chosen convenience over conscience. I let him knock and knock. Eventually I opened the door, but I didn't let him in. He looked older, more tired than I remembered. Hi Mom, he said, his voice cracked slightly. I said nothing. He held up the bag. I brought the bread, the one you like. I nodded, but didn't reach for it. He paused. I didn't know she was doing all that. I didn't know about the documents. I didn't mean stop, I said softly. Please don't lie. Not now. His eyes welled. I didn't know everything. But yes, I let it happen. I let her handle things because it was easier. Easier than standing up for your mother, I asked. Easier than protecting the woman who gave you everything. He looked down. I thought she was just helping. I didn't realize. Yes, I said. You didn't realize. And by the time you might have, it was already done. He nodded slowly, guilt folding his posture like a crumpled note. I'm sorry, he whispered. I believed that part, but it didn't change the truth. I'm not trying to erase you, David, I said. You are my son. You always will be. But I've erased the version of myself who let people use her kindness as currency. He didn't reply, just nodded, still holding the bag. I took it gently from his hands. I'll eat the bread, I said, because it reminds me of when you were still mine, when our love wasn't tangled in signatures and schemes. He blinked hard. Can I come in? No, I said kindly. Not today. Maybe not for a long time. A pause. Then, okay, he turned to go. David, I called after him. He looked back. I loved you so much, I forgot to protect myself. I won't make that mistake again. He nodded once, slowly, and walked away. I spent the next week settling into my life like a woman who had finally returned home. Even if the address was new, I got a part-time job at the local library, not for money, but to keep my mind busy and my soul fed. I joined a book club. I started walking again, just like my doctor kept nagging me to. Nancy and I made Thursday lunches a ritual. Sometimes we didn't even talk, we just sat in the sun, with tea and sandwiches and the kind of peace that doesn't need to explain itself. My phone stayed quiet. David stopped trying. Melanie never appeared again. And it was better that way. 3 months later, I received a letter from their lawyer. It was a carefully worded inquiry, requesting reconsideration of property agreements and potential mediation. They weren't suing, just circling, waiting for a crack. I handed it to Mr. Harris. He read it, sighed, and tossed it in his shredder. We're covered, he said. Every clause, every asset, ironclad. I nodded. Then let them circle. They're hoping you'll get tired, he said. Let them be the tired ones, I replied. You don't get a parade for standing up for yourself. You don't get applause for locking your doors, or saying no more. But what you do get is yours and only yours. You get to live, unobserved, unused, undepleted. You get to stop apologizing for existing. That is peace, and peace, I've learned, doesn't always come with a smile. Sometimes it comes with a slammed door. Sometimes it comes with silence, and sometimes it comes with a folder full of facts and a spine that finally refuses to bend. I'm Caroline Walker. I'm 62 years old, a retired teacher, a mother still learning her worth, a woman who gave until there was nothing left but the echo of her own name. Now, I speak it proudly, because I'm no longer a footnote in someone else's story. I've picked up the pen, and I'm writing my ending.